They say Sheriff Eli Cartwright kept order in Calhoun County until the night he chose to protect the wrong people. When a black family, the Turners, were marked for death by the Klan, Eli hid them beneath his own jailhouse floorboards, risking his badge, his home, and his blood kin. But in a town where the preacher wore a hood and the law served hate, secrets couldn't stay buried long. His own wife's fear became betrayal. His cousin led the riders who came for him, and by dawn, the sheriff's badge was nailed into his chest. Yet death didn't end his story. It passed the torch. Because the man he saved, Samuel Turner, didn't run. He came back. And when he did, the flames that took the sheriff came for every man who lit them. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The night hung over Calhoun County like a wet blanket. The courthouse square blazed with torches, their flames dancing wild against the darkness. Sheriff Eli Cartwright stood straight-backed on the jailhouse steps, his weathered face showing nothing. Inside, he felt his heart hammering against his ribs, but outside, he was stone. "Stand aside, Eli!" Deputy Royce Greeley shouted, his face red with anger. Behind him, 20 men shifted and muttered, gripping rifles and pitchforks. "Them Turners stole from Mr. E. Baron, and we aim to teach them the price of thieving." Eli's eyes found the Turner family huddled together at the edge of the square. Samuel Turner stood tall, but his eyes darted left and right, looking for escape. His wife Clara had one arm around 12-year-old Isaac and the other clutching little Ruth to her skirt. The girl's cough cut through the night air. "There ain't been no theft," Eli said, his voice carrying across the square without shouting. "Turners worked that cotton, and Mr. Barron changed the terms after harvest. That's a matter for Judge Peterson, not a midnight mob. Since when do you side with Niger—" Royce caught himself, glancing at the women in the crowd. "With coloreds over your own kind." Eli's hand rested on his holster, not threatening, just there. "I side with the law, deputy. And the law says no man takes justice into his own hands while I wear this badge." He tapped the silver star on his chest, and the small sound seemed to quiet the crowd. "Now, I'm taking the Turners into protective custody until this matter's settled proper. Anyone tries to interfere, they'll spend the night in a cell. That clear?" Royce stepped forward, mouth open to argue, but Eli cut him off. "That includes you, deputy. Badge don't give you special rights to break the law?" A murmur passed through the crowd. Eli knew these men. Most were decent enough when not riled up or drunk. A few troublemakers stood at the back, hoods partially visible under their coats. They were the real danger. "Y'all go on home now," Eli said, speaking to the crowd. "Come morning, we'll sort this out right and proper." For a moment, he thought Royce might push it. The younger man's hand twitched near his gun. But then someone in the crowd called out, "Let's go, boys. Sheriff's right. It's too wet for this nonsense anyway." Eli hadn't noticed the first drops of rain, but now he felt them cool on his neck. The crowd began to break apart, men muttering as they drifted away. Only Royce remained, glaring. "This ain't over, Eli," he said, voice low. "My sister married a fool." Then he was gone too, stalking off toward the saloon. Eli waited until the square was empty before approaching the Turner family. "Come with me," he said, not unkindly. "Quick now." Samuel Turner didn't move. "With respect, Sheriff, last colored folks you protected ended up swinging from trees." "That wasn't me," Eli said, feeling the weight of every lynching he'd failed to prevent. "I ain't asking you to trust my badge. Just trust I don't want your children hurt." Clara's eyes met his. She nodded once, then whispered something to Samuel. The man hesitated, then picked up Ruth, who buried her face in his neck. "Isaac, stay close," Clara said. Eli led them through the back door of the jailhouse, past the empty cells. The building was quiet except for the growing drumbeat of rain on the tin roof. He struck a match and lit a lantern, then moved aside a worn rug in his office. "Down here," he said, pulling up a trap door. "It's not much, but nobody knows about it. Smugglers built it during Prohibition." Below was a small cellar, musty but dry. Eli climbed down first with the lantern, showing them the space, maybe 10 feet square, with a dirt floor and rough wooden walls. "You'll be safe till I figure this out," he promised, handing Samuel the lantern. Clara looked at the dark space and squared her shoulders. "Come on, children. It's just for tonight." When they were settled, Eli brought them blankets from the jail cells and a loaf of bread from his own dinner pail. Little Ruth took the bread with solemn eyes, still coughing softly. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli nodded, not trusting his voice, and climbed back up. He closed the trap door gently and replaced the rug, then sat heavily in his chair. The rain fell harder now, drumming on the roof. Lightning flashed, and thunder followed. Eli took out a rag and his badge, working the tarnish from the silver points. His fingers traced the words, "To protect and serve." He glanced toward the trap door and sighed. "Law's worth nothing if it don't protect the right folks," he whispered, as thunder cracked overhead. The badge gleamed in the lamplight, catching his reflection. For the first time in years, Eli could look at it without shame. Morning came slow to Calhoun County. Eli woke in his office chair, stiff-necked and cotton-mouthed. The rain had stopped, leaving behind puddles that reflected the pale dawn sky. He checked on the Turners before he left. They slept huddled together on the dirt floor, Ruth's small body curled against her father's chest. "I'll be back soon," he whispered to Samuel, who woke instantly, eyes alert. "Stay quiet. Deputy won't be in till noon. He'll be nursing a hangover at Molly's place." Samuel nodded once. "We ain't going nowhere, Sheriff." Eli saddled his horse, a sturdy brown gelding named Buck, and rode toward First Baptist Church. The weekly Citizens' Council meeting started at 7 sharp, and Eli never missed one. They handled county business, road repairs, tax collections, school matters, all the ordinary workings of a small town trying to stay alive in hard times. At least, that's what they were supposed to do. The church stood bright white against the blue morning sky, its steeple pointing like an accusing finger toward heaven. Wagons and horses clustered in the yard, more than usual for a Tuesday meeting. Eli felt a prickle at the back of his neck, the same feeling he'd had in Cuba, just before the shooting started. He tied Buck to the hitching post and straightened his badge. No gun today. He never wore one in church. His daddy had taught him that much respect, at least. Inside, the church was quiet as a tomb. Eli paused at the doorway, letting his eyes adjust to the dimness. Then he saw them. A dozen men seated in the front pews, white hoods lowered around their necks, like deflated ghosts. Their faces turned toward him in unison. "Sheriff," one called out with false cheer. "Glad you could join us." Eli recognized him, Frank Wilcox, who ran the general store. Next to him sat Dr. Collins, who'd delivered half the county's babies. Mayor Thompson nodded from his seat. Men Eli knew. Men he'd tipped his hat to every day for 20 years. And at the pulpit, standing straight as a pine tree, was Reverend Silas Greeley, Eli's cousin, his blood. "Come in, Eli," Silas said, his voice honey-sweet. "We're just getting started." Eli walked slowly down the aisle. Every step felt wrong, like walking into quicksand. He took a seat in the back row, away from the hooded men. "As I was saying, brothers," Silas continued, "our county faces a disease more dangerous than any fever. The disease of disloyalty." Silas was a tall man, with a preacher's voice that could thunder or whisper. Today, it slithered. His eyes, the same blue as Eli's own, glittered with something that wasn't quite holy. The good book tells us a house divided cannot stand. And Calhoun County is divided, brothers, divided by those who uphold the natural order. He paused, looking at the hooded men, and those who betray it. Eli's hands tightened on the pew in front of him. "We have traitors among us," Silas continued. "Traitors who wear badges meant to protect white Christian folk, but instead shelter coloreds who don't know their place." The men murmured their agreement. Frank Wilcox turned to stare at Eli, his face hard. "Last night," Silas said, his voice rising, "a family of Negroes stole from Jeremiah Barron, a good Christian man who's given them honest work when no one else would. And when our good townspeople sought justice, they were stopped by one of our own." Every eye in the church turned to Eli. He kept his face blank, though his heart hammered. "Now," Silas continued, "we have reliable information that this colored family is hiding right under our noses. And tonight, brothers, we will show this county what happens to thieves and those who protect them." Mayor Thompson stood up. "When and where, Reverend?" "Midnight," Silas answered. "We gather at Crooked Creek Bridge. Our source says the sheriff's been hiding them in the old jailhouse cellar." Eli forced himself not to react. How did they know? Who had talked? "The Lord's work isn't always gentle," Silas said, smiling now. "Sometimes his justice requires fire." Eli stood up. He couldn't sit there another minute. "Leaving so soon, cousin?" Silas asked, his eyes sharp. "Got duties," Eli said, keeping his voice steady. "Tax collections don't wait for sermons." Silas smiled wider. "Of course. We wouldn't want to keep you from your duties." Eli walked out, feeling their eyes on his back like hot pokers. Outside, the morning sun hit him like a slap, so bright it hurt. He stumbled, catching himself on the church railing. "God help me," he muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I got the devil for kin." He needed to move fast. Get the Turners out of town before nightfall. Get them somewhere safe, if there was such a place for a colored family in Mississippi. Buck nickered softly as Eli approached. Across the road, half hidden by oak trees, two riders sat motionless on horseback. Eli recognized them, Silas's younger brothers, Daniel and Matthew, watching him, following him. Eli mounted Buck slowly, making a show of adjusting his saddle. His mind raced. They knew about the cellar. They'd be watching the jailhouse. He needed a distraction, a way to get the Turners out unseen. He tipped his hat to the brothers, who didn't move. Then he turned Buck toward town, riding at an unhurried pace, while inside his thoughts tumbled like leaves in a storm. The devil wore a white hood now, and he had Eli's own face. Shadows stretched long across the county road as Eli rode toward home. The afternoon sun hung low, painting everything gold. His farmhouse appeared on the horizon, whitewashed boards, green shutters, and a wide front porch where he'd built a swing for Margaret when they first married. His stomach knotted. How much should he tell her? Margaret was a good woman, but she feared her brother Royce and their cousin Silas almost as much as she feared the Lord. As he approached, Eli spotted his daughter Ellen sitting on the porch steps, needle flashing in the sunlight. At 17, she looked more like her mother every day. Same honey-brown hair, same delicate hands. She pretended not to notice him until he was nearly at the gate. "Evening, Papa," she called, setting aside her sewing. "Evening, sweetheart." Eli dismounted, his joints aching from the long day. "Your mama inside." Ellen nodded. "Making supper. Uncle Royce said he might stop by." Eli's jaw tightened. "Did he now?" "Said he had business to discuss." Ellen watched her father's face carefully. "Is something wrong, Papa?" "No," Eli lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." The screen door opened with a creak, and Margaret stepped onto the porch. Her apron was dusted with flour, her cheeks flushed from the kitchen heat. "You're late," she said. Not angry, just stating a fact. Had things to tend to. Eli climbed the steps and kissed her cheek. She smelled like bread and lavender soap. Margaret studied his face, her eyes narrowing slightly. You look like you've seen a ghost. Just tired, Eli repeated, moving past her into the house. Inside, the kitchen was warm and bright. A pot bubbled on the stove, filling the air with the smell of beans and ham. Eli washed his hands at the sink, aware of Margaret watching him. "Council meeting run long?" she asked, returning to her biscuit-making. Eli dried his hands on a dish towel. "You could say that. Royce said there was trouble last night. Something about that Turner family stealing from Mr. Barron." Eli's hands stilled. "That what he told you?" Margaret kept her eyes on the dough. "Said there was nearly a lynching, but you stopped it." "I upheld the law," Eli said carefully. Before Margaret could respond, boots thumped on the porch, and the screen door banged open. "Evening, family." Royce Greeley filled the doorway, all 6 feet of him grinning like he owned the place. At 38, he still had the swagger of a younger man, though his waistline had thickened from too much whiskey. "Uncle Royce!" Ellen called from the porch, following him inside. "There's my favorite niece." Royce ruffled her hair. "Pretty as a picture, ain't she, Eli?" Eli nodded stiffly. "Margaret says you're joining us for supper?" "If that's no trouble." Royce hung his hat on a peg by the door. "Figured we could talk after. Man to man." The meal passed in uncomfortable silence, broken only by Royce's attempts at conversation. He talked about the weather, about the new Ford automobile Mayor Thompson had ordered, about everything except what hung in the air between him and Eli. Finally, as Margaret served coffee and Ellen cleared the plates, Royce leaned back in his chair. "So, Eli, how are your new pets settling in at the jailhouse?" Ellen dropped a fork. Margaret froze, coffee pot in hand. "What pets?" Ellen asked. Royce grinned. "Your daddy's got himself some colored folks locked up. Keeping 'em safe, he says." "That's enough, Royce," Eli said quietly. "What?" "Just making conversation." Royce's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though folks are mighty curious why you'd risk your neck for a thieving. They didn't steal anything," Eli cut in. "Barron cheated them out of their share, same as he does all his sharecroppers." The kitchen went silent. Margaret set the coffee pot down with a thunk. "Ellen," she said suddenly, "go finish your mending on the porch." "But Mama?" "Now, Ellen." Ellen glanced between her father and uncle, then reluctantly left the kitchen. The screen door closed behind her with a soft snap. "I should be going too," Royce said, rising. "Got night patrol." He winked at Eli. "Some of us still know which side we're on." After Royce left, Margaret turned to Eli, her face pale. "Is it true? You're hiding that colored family?" Eli met her eyes. "Yes." "In the name of heaven? Why?" "Because they'd be dead otherwise." Eli lowered his voice, though Ellen was surely listening from the porch. "Barron accused them of stealing their own cotton. You know how these things go, Margaret. A rope, a tree, and nobody asks questions after." Margaret sank into a chair. "Silas was at our church meeting today. He didn't mention—" "Silas was leading it," Eli said bitterly. "White hoods and all. Oh, Lord." Margaret pressed a hand to her mouth. "Eli, what have you done?" "What I had to." He took her hands in his. "Margaret, listen to me. It's just for a day or two, till I can get them safely out of the county. Nobody needs to know." "But they already know." Her voice shook. "Royce knows. Silas knows. They suspect. They don't know for sure." Eli squeezed her hands. "I need you with me on this, Margaret. Please." She pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "And if they come here? If they drag you out in the night? What about Ellen?" "That won't happen." "You don't know that." Tears filled her eyes. "You're gambling with our lives, Eli." He had no answer for that. She was right. Later, after Margaret had gone to bed, Eli retrieved a small wooden lockbox from his saddlebag. He carried it to their bedroom, where Margaret pretended to sleep, her back to him. Quietly, he slid the box under the bed. "What's that?" Margaret's voice startled him. "Just county records," Eli said. "Tax papers. Nothing important." She didn't answer, but he felt her watching as he undressed and slipped into bed beside her. Near midnight, Eli rose again. He dressed silently in the darkness, strapped on his gun belt, and kissed Margaret's forehead. She opened her eyes. "Where are you going?" "Got to move them," he whispered. "Tonight, before Silas comes looking." Margaret sat up. "Eli, I'll be back by dawn." He squeezed her hand. "Trust me." She didn't answer. Eli saddled Buck and lit a lantern. As he rode down the long drive, he glanced back at the house. Margaret stood at the bedroom window, a pale ghost behind the glass. Her lips moved, and though he couldn't hear the words, he felt them like a cold wind on his neck. "You'll hang for this, Eli, or worse." He turned away and urged Buck toward town, the lantern's light growing smaller and smaller until it disappeared into the darkness. Night wrapped the small town in darkness. Only a few yellow squares of lamplight broke the blackness as Eli rode down the empty main street. The jailhouse sat at the far end, a squat brick building with barred windows and a tin roof that gleamed dully under the half-moon. Eli dismounted, tying Buck to the hitching post. He glanced up and down the street before unlocking the door. Empty. That was good. He carried a cloth sack filled with food and extra blankets, the weight of it reassuring in his hands. Inside, the jailhouse smelled of old wood and dust. 2 empty cells faced each other across the narrow hallway. Eli lit a lamp, keeping the flame low, then moved to his desk. Kneeling, he rolled back the worn rug, revealing the trapdoor built into the floorboard. "Samuel?" he called softly, lifting the heavy door. "It's Sheriff Cartwright." A small cough drifted up from below, followed by Samuel Turner's deep voice. "We're here, Sheriff." Eli descended the ladder into the cellar. The space was cramped, maybe 10 feet by 12, with a dirt floor and stone walls. A single oil lamp cast long shadows. In the dim light, Samuel sat with his back against the wall. His daughter Ruth curled against his chest. Her small body shook with another cough. "She been like that all day?" Eli asked, setting down his sack. Samuel nodded, his hand gentle on Ruth's back. "Started this morning. Damp down here. Brought more blankets." Eli pulled them from the sack. "And food. Where are Clara and Isaac?" Samuel nodded toward the far corner, where his wife and son slept on a pallet of straw, wrapped in Eli's old horse blankets. Ruth coughed again, a wet, rattling sound that seemed too big for her small chest. "Let me see her," Eli said, kneeling beside them. Samuel hesitated, then nodded. Eli placed a hand on Ruth's forehead. She was warm, but not burning up. "My wife used to mix honey and whiskey for Ellen's coughs," Eli said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small jar of honey and a flask. "Don't have much honey, but the whiskey might help." Samuel watched as Eli mixed a spoonful of honey with a few drops of whiskey in a tin cup, then added water from a canteen. "Here, little one," Eli said, holding it to Ruth's lips. "Sip slow." Ruth looked up at her father, who nodded. She drank the mixture, making a face at the taste. "That'll ease it some," Eli said, standing. "But you can't stay down here much longer." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "What's happened?" Eli sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "The clan knows I've got you hidden somewhere. They don't know exactly where, but they're suspicious. My deputy, my own brother-in-law, he's watching me." "So you're turning us out?" Samuel said flatly. "No," Eli shook his head. "I'm getting you out. There's another way." He moved to the far wall, brushing aside cobwebs to reveal a narrow wooden door set into the stonework. This tunnel was built during Prohibition. Smugglers used it to move whiskey when the feds came looking. Leads to a drainage ditch by the river. About half a mile east. Samuel stood, laying Ruth gently on the blankets. "How long have you known about this?" "Since I became sheriff," Eli said. "Never had cause to use it before." He opened the door, revealing a low, dark passage. "It's narrow, but you can crawl through. If things go bad, if I don't come back tomorrow, you take this way out." Samuel studied the tunnel, then turned back to Eli. Why are you doing this? Risking everything for us? Eli didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sat on an upturned crate and offered the flask to Samuel. After a moment, Samuel took it, sipped, and handed it back. I rode with Theodore Roosevelt in Cuba, Eli said finally. Rough Riders. You serve? Samuel nodded. Buffalo Soldier, 10th Cavalry, Philippines. Same flag, Eli said quietly. Different army, Samuel replied. They gave us the worst mounts, the oldest guns. But you fought all the same. Had something to prove, I guess. The two men fell silent, passing the flask between them. Above, the floorboards creaked. Someone walking in the jailhouse. Samuel tensed, his hand moving to his wife's shoulder. Eli put a finger to his lips, then climbed the ladder. He closed the trapdoor quietly, replaced the rug, and moved to the front door just as footsteps receded down the steps outside. Through the window, Eli caught a glimpse of Royce's back as he crossed the street, stopping to light a cigarette. The deputy turned, staring back at the jailhouse for a long moment before continuing toward the saloon. When Eli returned to the cellar, Samuel had woken Clara and Isaac. They huddled together, eyes wide with fear. Just my deputy, Eli assured them. He's gone now. He suspects, Samuel said. It wasn't a question. Eli nodded. I'll move you tomorrow night. Got a wagon ready at the livery stable. Can get you to the county line by dawn. Clara spoke for the first time, her voice soft but steady. And then what, Sheriff? Where do people like us go when there's nowhere left? Eli had no answer for that. Samuel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden cross, carved from dark wood and polished smooth. My father made this, he said. Carried it through the war. He pressed it into Eli's palm. So you don't forget who you're fighting for. Eli closed his fingers around the cross. I'll be back tomorrow night. Be ready. He climbed the ladder, pausing at the top to look back. The Turners huddled together, father, mother, son, daughter, faces upturned in the dim light, watching him with a mixture of fear and hope. Outside, the night air felt clean in his lungs after the musty cellar. Eli mounted Buck and rode slowly toward the edge of town. In the distance, he spotted a rider moving away from him, the familiar slouch of Royce's shoulders, unmistakable even in darkness. The deputy rode hard toward the Baptist church, where lamplight still burned in the windows despite the late hour. Suspicion burned in Royce's eyes as he glanced back once, then spurred his horse forward, disappearing into the night. Dawn crept over Calhoun County, painting the sky pink and gold. Margaret Cartwright sat alone at her kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee warming her hands. The house felt empty without Eli. He hadn't come home last night. Again. She stared out the window at the chicken coop where Ellen was gathering eggs, her daughter's movements careful and precise, just like her father's. Margaret sipped her coffee, bitter and black, just how Eli liked it. A horse's whinny broke the morning quiet. Margaret tensed, hoping it was Eli but knowing better. The heavy footsteps on the porch confirmed her fears. "Morning, Margaret." Royce Greeley filled the doorway, hat in hand, his thin lips stretched in what might pass for a smile. "Thought I'd check on my sister." Margaret nodded toward the coffee pot. "Help yourself." Royce poured a cup, adding 3 spoonfuls of sugar before sitting across from her. "Eli not home again?" "County business," Margaret said stiffly. "Is that what he calls it?" Royce stirred his coffee slowly, the spoon clinking against the cup. "Folks are talking, Margaret." Her stomach tightened. "Folks always talk." "Not like this." Royce leaned forward, lowering his voice, though no one else was in the house. "They're saying Eli's protecting the wrong color, that he's hiding that Turner family somewhere." Margaret kept her face blank, but her hands trembled slightly around her cup. "That's nonsense." "Is it?" Royce's eyes narrowed. "Because I followed him last night, to the jailhouse, where he stayed for hours, with nobody locked up inside." Margaret stood abruptly, taking her cup to the sink. "My husband takes his duties seriously. If he was at the jailhouse, he had reason. Sure he did. Royce's chair scraped back. He moved to stand beside her, too close. But Silas is concerned, Margaret. The whole town is. This ain't just about some colored family. It's about order. What do you mean? Silas is planning to cleanse the county. Royce's voice dropped even lower. Starting with traitors. Margaret's blood ran cold. Traitors? Those who betray their own kind. Royce put a hand on her shoulder. It felt heavy, trapping. But Silas still respects Eli. For your daddy's sake, if nothing else. If someone close to Eli came forward, told the truth about what he's doing, well, maybe Silas would be merciful. You want me to betray my husband? Margaret whispered. Royce squeezed her shoulder. I want you to save him, sister. Before it's too late. The screen door slammed as Ellen returned with a basket of eggs. Royce stepped back, tipping his hat. Think on it, he said, loud enough for Ellen to hear. And tell Eli I'm looking for him. After Royce left, Margaret stood frozen at the sink, Ellen's worried voice barely registering. Save him. The words echoed in her mind as she mechanically started breakfast, cracking eggs with shaking hands. Throughout the day, fear gnawed at her. By evening, she could bear it no longer. She saddled her mare and rode toward town, the setting sun casting long shadows across the fields. The parsonage sat beside the Baptist church, a neat white house with a small garden. Reverend Silas Greeley's wife, Martha, answered Margaret's knock, her thin face pinched with surprise. Margaret, this is unexpected. Are you here for the Ladies' Aid meeting? No, I need to speak with the Reverend. It's urgent. Martha led her to Silas's study, a dark-paneled room lined with books. Silas rose from his desk, his tall frame imposing even in the simple black suit he wore. Margaret, what brings you here at this hour? Martha, would you leave us? Silas asked gently. When his wife had gone, he gestured for Margaret to sit. What troubles you, cousin? The words stuck in Margaret's throat. She twisted her wedding band, gold worn thin from years of wear. It's Eli, she finally managed. He's hiding people. That colored family. The Turners. They're beneath the jailhouse. Silas's expression remained calm, but his eyes hardened. Go on. There's a cellar. From Prohibition days. He's keeping them there. The words tumbled out now, unstoppable. Royce says, he says you're planning something, that Eli might be hurt. Royce talks too much, Silas said softly. He moved around the desk to sit beside her, taking her trembling hands in his. But you did right to come to me, Margaret. Family must stand together in times of crisis. You won't hurt him, will you? Tears blurred her vision. He's a good man. He's just confused. Of course he is, Silas soothed. Eli's always had a soft heart. It's why he needs our guidance. He patted her hand. I'll handle this discreetly, for the good of all concerned. Relief washed through Margaret. Thank you. I should get back before he realizes I'm gone. Silas walked her to the door. Go home and rest easy, cousin. By tomorrow, this will all be resolved. Margaret mounted her horse, the weight lifting from her shoulders as she rode home through the gathering dusk. She had saved Eli. Everything would be all right now. Behind her, the parsonage door closed. Silas's gentle smile vanished. He strode to his desk, pulling open a drawer to reveal a white hood. With quick, practiced movements, he wrote 3 notes, sealed them, and handed them to a boy waiting in the hall. Take these to Brother Mason, Brother Wallace, and Brother Tate, he instructed. Tell them it's time. Tonight. Full regalia. Yes, Reverend, the boy said, wide-eyed. As Margaret rode home, unaware, men throughout the county read Silas's message. They slipped from their homes with mumbled excuses, gathering in a clearing behind the old sawmill. White hoods emerged from hiding places, torches were lit. Night deepened over Calhoun County. The moon hid behind thunderclouds gathering on the horizon. Outside the jailhouse, Eli sat on the steps, smoking a cigarette. The trapdoor stood open behind him, letting fresh air into the cellar below. Samuel Turner climbed up, sitting beside him. Neither man spoke for several minutes, sharing the quiet darkness. "Storm coming," Samuel finally said, nodding at the clouds. "Looks that way," Eli agreed, offering his tobacco pouch. Samuel rolled a cigarette, his fingers deft and practiced. "My daddy used to say you could smell rain before it falls. Said it was the earth opening up to receive it." Eli nodded. "My pa said the same." They smoked in companionable silence, two soldiers from different armies, finding common ground in the quiet moments between battles. "Tomorrow night," Eli said softly. "I'll have the wagon ready." Samuel exhaled smoke, watching it curl upward. "My boy keeps asking where we'll go. I don't have an answer for him." "I have a cousin in Tennessee," Eli said. "Owns a farm, needs workers, pays fair." He tapped ash from his cigarette. "Gave me his address once. It's in that lockbox under my bed." A distant sound cut through the night, a rumble that wasn't thunder. Both men tensed, listening as it grew louder. Hoofbeats, many of them, rolling closer beneath the gathering storm. The jailhouse door burst open with a crash that shook the walls. Torchlight flooded the small office as men poured in, their faces hidden behind white hoods. Royce Greeley led them, his badge gleaming against his shirt. Behind him towered Reverend Silas, hood pushed back to reveal his stern face. "Well now, cousin," Silas said, his voice smooth as honey despite the rage in his eyes. "Seems we caught ourselves a traitor." Eli stood slowly, positioning himself in front of the open trap door. "This is county property. You boys are trespassing." Royce laughed, the sound ugly and sharp. "Ain't trespassing when we're here on official business." He tapped his deputy badge. "Got word you're hiding coloreds where they don't belong." Samuel crouched at the top of the cellar stairs, his eyes meeting Eli's for a brief moment. Eli gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "Don't know what you're talking about," Eli said loudly. "Ain't nobody here but me." "Liar," one of the hooded men shouted. "Margaret told us everything." A flash of pain crossed Eli's face at the mention of his wife, but he recovered quickly. "You boys turn around and leave. Now, before this gets ugly." While Eli kept their attention, Samuel slipped back down the stairs. Clara already had the children ready, little Ruth clutching her rag doll, Isaac standing tall beside his mother. Through the tunnel, Samuel whispered, fast and quiet. "Don't stop for nothing." Above, the confrontation escalated. Silas stepped forward, Bible in hand. "Where are they, Eli?" "The Turner family." "We know you've been hiding them." "They ran off," Eli said firmly. "Headed north yesterday. I gave them papers and sent them on their way." "You expect us to believe that?" Royce spat on the floor. "Search the place if you want," Eli challenged, knowing the tunnel entrance would be hidden once the trapdoor closed. "Won't find nobody." Samuel guided his family through the narrow earthen passage, the walls pressing in on either side. Clara supported Ruth, who whimpered softly until Isaac shushed her. Behind them, the sounds of struggle grew louder. Furniture crashing, men shouting, Eli's voice rising in defiance. "You're lying for them," Royce's voice echoed down the passage. "Your own wife told us the truth." A heavy thud followed, a body hitting the floor. Clara flinched, but kept moving, her hand pressed against Ruth's mouth to muffle her cries. The tunnel stretched for what felt like miles, though Samuel knew it couldn't be more than a quarter mile. The air grew damp as they neared the river. Finally, he saw a faint glow ahead, moonlight through the hidden exit. Back at the jailhouse, Eli lay on the floor, blood streaming from his nose and mouth. Royce stood over him, knuckles raw. "Search every inch," Silas commanded. Men tore through drawers, overturned furniture, even checked the cells. One discovered the trap door, but by then it had fallen shut, appearing to be just part of the floor. "Nothing, Reverend," he reported. "Maybe they did run off." "He's still hiding something," Silas said. eyeing Eli with disgust. "Bring him to the courthouse. We'll get the truth." 4 men grabbed Eli, dragging him outside despite his struggles. The night air hung heavy with the promise of rain, lightning flashing in the distance. They hauled him across the square to the old oak tree that stood before the courthouse steps. "Last chance, cousin," Silas said, leaning close. "Where are they?" Eli spat blood onto Silas's polished shoe. "Gone where you can't hurt them." Rage transformed Silas's face. "Hold him." Men forced Eli against the tree trunk, while Royce ripped the sheriff's badge from his chest. Silas produced a hammer and nail from his coat pocket. "You betrayed your badge," Silas declared, taking it from Royce. "Now it'll mark you forever." The first hammer blow drove the nail through the badge and into Eli's chest. He screamed, the sound cutting through the night like the lightning that split the sky above. Blood blossomed around the metal star as Silas hammered it deeper. "String him up," Silas ordered when he finished. A rope appeared, looped over a sturdy branch. They forced it around Eli's neck as he gasped for breath, blood soaking his shirt. "Any last words, Sheriff?" Royce taunted. Eli looked at his brother-in-law through swollen eyes. "Tell Margaret. I understand." The men heaved on the rope. Eli's body rose, feet kicking, hands clutching at the noose. Lightning flashed again, illuminating his face, contorted in pain, but somehow still defiant. Meanwhile, Samuel and his family emerged from the tunnel, crawling through thick brush beside the river. Rain had begun to fall, pattering against the leaves. Samuel tensed as headlights approached on the dirt road, then relaxed when he recognized the battered wagon. "Samuel?" a low voice called. "That you?" "Jonas," Samuel breathed in relief. "Thank God." Jonas Fields, a stocky man with graying hair, climbed down from the wagon. He clasped Samuel's hand, pulling him into a brief embrace. "Got your message. Didn't expect so much company, though." "We had to run," Samuel explained quickly. "The sheriff—" "I heard," Jonas cut him off, glancing nervously toward town. "We need to move. They'll be searching by dawn." He helped Clara and the children into the back of the wagon, covering them with canvas and hay. "Stay still, no matter what happens," he instructed. "We got checkpoints to pass." The wagon creaked as Jonas turned it around, heading away from town along back roads only locals knew. Rain fell harder now, washing away their tracks, muffling the sound of the wheels. "What about the sheriff?" Samuel asked quietly. Jonas's face grew grim in the darkness. "Don't think about that now. You focus on keeping your family alive." They traveled through the night, avoiding main roads, twice hiding in the woods when other vehicles approached. By dawn, they had crossed into Sunflower County, where Jonas's small farm lay hidden among cotton fields. "You'll be safe here," Jonas said as they unloaded. For a while, at least. While Clara settled the children in Jonas's barn, Samuel slipped away. Despite Jonas's warnings, he had to know. He made his way back to the river crossing, keeping to the shadows as the rising sun burned away the night's rain clouds. From the riverbank, he could see the courthouse square. A crowd had gathered, despite the early hour. In their midst, swaying gently in the morning breeze, hung Eli's body, still pinned with his own badge. Samuel crept closer, using skills learned as a buffalo soldier to move unseen. When the crowd dispersed, muttering and pointing, he approached the tree. Eli's face was peaceful now, the struggle over. His boots hung a foot above the muddy ground. With gentle hands, Samuel removed the nail and badge from Eli's chest. The metal star was slick with blood, bent from the hammer blows. "You saved us," Samuel whispered, tucking the badge into his pocket. "I'll return the debt." As if in response, rain began to fall again. Soft, steady drops that washed the blood from Eli's body. Samuel bowed his head for a moment, then melted back into the shadows. The debt would be paid, but first, his family needed him alive. 2 days had passed since the hanging. Jonas Fields's farm sat nestled among tall pines at the edge of Sunflower County. far enough from the main road that visitors were rare. The modest cabin and sturdy barn provided shelter, but not peace. Samuel Turner sat on the porch steps, staring into the darkness. Sleep wouldn't come. Hadn't come properly since they'd fled. The sheriff's badge lay heavy in his pocket, a constant reminder of the debt he now carried. Inside the barn, Clara and the children slept on makeshift beds of hay covered with Jonas's spare quilts. Samuel had tried lying beside them earlier, but the moment his eyes closed, he saw Eli's body swinging from that tree. "Still up?" Jonas's voice came quietly from behind him. Samuel nodded without turning. "Can't seem to rest." Jonas settled beside him on the steps, offering a jar of clear liquid. "Might help." Samuel took a small sip, feeling the moonshine burn down his throat. "Man died for us, Jonas. Died because he chose to help." "Not your fault," Jonas said firmly. "Feels like it is." Samuel pulled out the badge, turning it over in his hands. The dried blood had darkened to rust color. He had a wife, a daughter. "And you've got a wife and 2 kids sleeping right there." Jonas pointed toward the barn. "You're alive because of him. Don't waste that by blaming yourself." Samuel fell silent, rolling the badge between his fingers. The metal caught the moonlight, winking like a distant star. In Calhoun County, Margaret Cartwright stood alone beneath the courthouse oak. The rope had been removed, but she could still see the mark on the branch where it had been tied. The ground beneath was trampled, stained dark despite the rain that had come and gone. She wore black, her face hidden behind a thin veil. It had been a day since they'd buried Eli, a quiet affair with few mourners. The pastor from the Methodist church, not Silas, had said words over the grave. Most townsfolk had stayed away. "Mrs. Cartwright." Margaret turned to see Mrs. Bellamy, the postmaster's wife, standing a few feet away. "I'm so sorry for your loss," the woman said, though her eyes were cool and assessing. "Thank you," Margaret replied, her voice flat. "Such a tragedy." Mrs. Bellamy stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Though people are saying the sheriff brought it on himself, harboring criminals and such." Margaret stiffened. "My husband upheld the law." "Of course." The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I should be going. Good day to you." As Mrs. Bellamy walked away, Margaret heard her whisper to another woman across the square. "Traitor's wife." The words carried on the still air. More eyes watched from storefronts and porches. Faces that once greeted her with respect now showed suspicion or outright contempt. Margaret lifted her chin and walked steadily toward home, feeling their stares like needles against her back. The Cartwright house sat quiet at the edge of town. Ellen had gone to stay with her aunt in Memphis. Margaret had insisted, fearing what might happen if her daughter remained. The rooms felt empty, haunted by Eli's absence. Margaret went directly to their bedroom and knelt beside the bed. The floorboard beneath came up easily when she pressed on its edge. Eli's hiding place. The small lock box remained undisturbed. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside lay a leather-bound ledger and several folded documents. Margaret opened the ledger first, recognizing Eli's neat handwriting. The pages contained names, dates, and amounts, a record of bribes paid to county officials. Beside many entries were notes about Klan activities. Johnson paid $50 to Silas for raid on colored school. Barnett contributed wagon and horses for night ride to Copiah County. Reverend received $200 from lumber company to discourage colored workers from organizing. Tears blurred Margaret's vision. Eli had been gathering evidence, building a case against his own cousin and the power structure that supported him. Her confession hadn't just led to his death. It had destroyed his work. "Oh, Eli," she whispered. "What have I done?" The front door slammed, startling her. Heavy boots crossed the parlor floor. "Margaret!" Royce's voice called. Quickly, she closed the box and slid it back under the floorboard, replacing the board just as Royce appeared in the doorway. Her brother wore Eli's badge now, pinned to his vest as if it belonged there. "Came to check on you," he said, leaning against the doorframe. His eyes scanned the room. "You holding up all right?" "As well as can be expected," she answered, rising to her feet. Royce nodded. "Found anything interesting around here? Papers? Notes? That sort of thing?" Margaret's heart pounded, but her face remained calm. "Just bills and such." "Why?" Eli was collecting information he shouldn't have been. Royce stepped into the room. "Dangerous information. Best if it all gets burned." "I haven't found anything like that." He studied her face, then shrugged. "If you do, don't read it, just burn it. For your own good, understand?" "I understand." After Royce left, Margaret waited until his horse's hoofbeats faded before retrieving the lockbox. She couldn't keep it under the bed. They'd search there eventually. Her eyes fell on the brick fireplace in the bedroom. One of the bricks near the back was loose. Eli had mentioned needing to fix it. Working quickly, she removed the brick, hollowed out some of the mortar behind it, and slid the ledger inside. The other papers she wrapped in oilcloth and buried in the garden, beneath the rose bush Eli had planted for their 10th anniversary. Night fell. Margaret sat beside the cold hearth, a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. She'd kept one page from the ledger, unable to part with it. By lamplight, she read Eli's words again. "Truth must outlive me. If they discover what I know, I won't see Christmas. But the record must remain. For Ellen, for the county, for those who can't speak for themselves." Margaret pressed the paper to her chest. "Then I'll see that it does," she whispered to the empty room. Miles away, Samuel bolted upright in the darkness of Jonas's barn. Sweat soaked his shirt, despite the cool night air. In his dream, Eli had been hanging from the tree, but his eyes were open, watching Samuel with a strange intensity. "You all right?" Clara whispered beside him, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Just a dream," he murmured, though his heart still raced. "About the sheriff?" Samuel nodded, then remembered she couldn't see him in the darkness. "Yes, about Eli." Clara's fingers tightened around his. "You called his name." Samuel reached into his pocket, feeling the edge of the badge. "He gave everything to help us, and I left him there." "You had no choice," Clara reminded him. "What could you have done against all those men?" Samuel had no answer. He lay back down beside her, staring up at the barn's rafters. Sleep wouldn't return, he knew. In that same sleepless hour, two souls turned with the weight of the same man's death. One with guilt for causing it, one with guilt for surviving it. Both wondering what came next. Both knowing somehow that Eli Cartwright's death was not the end of the story, but its beginning. Dawn had not yet broken when Samuel rose from his makeshift bed. The barn was silent except for the soft breathing of his children and Clara's gentle snoring. He moved with deliberate care, gathering the few belongings he needed: a knife, some jerky, and the sheriff's badge that hadn't left his pocket since he'd taken it. Samuel paused beside his sleeping family. Ruth's small face looked peaceful in sleep. Her cough finally quieted after Jonas's wife had made her a tea of honey and herbs. Isaac slept with one arm flung protectively across his sister. Clara lay curled beside them, her face marked with worry even in rest. He bent to kiss her forehead. Her eyes fluttered open immediately. "Where are you going?" she whispered, instantly alert. "I need to finish something," Samuel said, straightening up. Clara sat up, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. "You're going back there?" It wasn't a question. Samuel nodded anyway. "They'll kill you, Samuel." Her voice trembled. "Just like they killed him." "Maybe," he admitted. "But that man died for us, for our children. I can't just keep running." Clara stood, careful not to wake the children. She gripped his arm and pulled him outside the barn, where they could speak without being overheard. "You think I don't understand about debt?" she hissed. "But what about the debt you owe them?" She pointed back toward their sleeping children. They need a father, not a martyr. They need a world where a good man doesn't hang for doing right, Samuel countered. Justice has to come from the same dirt that drank his blood. It has to start somewhere, Clara. And it has to be you? Tears shone in her eyes. Samuel touched her cheek gently. It has to be someone who saw, someone who knows the truth. Clara stared at him for a long moment. Then she disappeared into the barn, returning moments later with a small bundle. "Extra bread," she said, pressing it into his hands. "And Jonas's knife. It's sharper than yours." Samuel took the bundle, recognizing her acceptance even if she couldn't give her blessing. "I'll be back," he promised. "You better be," she answered fiercely, "or I'll find those men myself." Samuel believed her. As the eastern sky began to lighten, he rode away on Jonas's old mare, feeling Clara's eyes on his back until he disappeared into the trees. The journey to Calhoun County took all day, Samuel traveling through back roads and woods to avoid being seen. He'd wrapped a scarf around his face against the dust, which also served to hide his identity. The few white farmers he passed averted their eyes, taking him for just another colored field hand on an errand. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered, promising a storm. Samuel approached Calhoun from the north, abandoning the mare in a stand of trees and continuing on foot through the gathering darkness. The county looked the same, fields stretching toward the horizon, small farmhouses dotting the landscape, but felt different now. Every shadow seemed to hide danger. He knew where the Cartwright house stood, on the eastern edge of town, set back from the road with a small orchard beside it. As twilight deepened, Samuel crept through the trees until he could see the house. A single lamp burned in a downstairs window. Moving quietly, he approached the back door. Before he could decide how to announce himself, the door swung open. Margaret Cartwright stood framed in the doorway, a shotgun aimed squarely at his chest. "One step closer, and I pull this trigger," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Samuel froze, slowly raising his hands. "Mrs. Cartwright," he said quietly, "I'm not here to harm you." She squinted into the darkness. Recognition dawned slowly on her face. The gun lowered slightly. "You're one of them," she said. "The family Eli was protecting." "Samuel Turner, ma'am." Margaret hesitated, then stepped back. "Come inside. Quick, before someone sees you." The kitchen was warm, smelling of bread and coffee. Margaret set the shotgun against the wall but kept glancing toward it. They stood facing each other across the kitchen table, neither seeming to know how to begin. "Why are you here?" Margaret finally asked. Samuel reached into his pocket and pulled out the badge. He placed it on the table between them. "Your husband gave his life for my family." Margaret stared at the badge. Dried blood still stained its surface. "And now you've come for revenge." "I've come for justice." A bitter laugh escaped her. "There's no justice in Calhoun County." "Not anymore." She sank into a chair. "Maybe there never was." Samuel remained standing, his hands resting on the back of a chair. "The men who did this, they need to answer for it." "They won't," Margaret said flatly. "They run this county." Silence fell between them. The weight of shared grief and different guilt filled the room. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. "I betrayed him," Margaret said suddenly. Her eyes, when they met Samuel's, were dry and haunted. "My brother Royce convinced me Eli was in danger. Said if I told them where you were hiding, they'd just arrest you, not hurt anyone." Her voice cracked. "I believed him. I went to Silas myself." Samuel's hands tightened on the chair back. "You killed him," he said, his voice low. "Yes." The simple admission seemed to age her before his eyes. "I killed my husband as surely as if I'd put the rope around his neck myself." For a long moment, Samuel said nothing. The anger that had driven him here suddenly felt hollow against the reality of this broken woman. "He was gathering evidence," Margaret continued, "against Silas, against the clan. recordings of bribes, dates of raids, names of victims. She rose and went to the fireplace, removing a loose brick to extract a leather-bound ledger. He meant to send it to the federal marshals in Jackson. She placed the ledger beside the badge. If you're going to finish what he started, do it clean. Samuel opened the ledger, scanning the neat handwriting that detailed years of corruption and violence. There's something else, Margaret said. She disappeared into another room, returning with a rifle. Eli's service rifle, from Cuba. She held it out. He'd want you to have it. Samuel took the rifle, feeling its weight. A good weapon, well maintained. The stock was smooth from years of handling. Why help me? He asked. Because I need to make something right, she answered simply. And because Eli believed in you enough to die for you. Samuel tucked the ledger inside his coat. The badge he buried deeper in his pocket. The rifle he checked carefully, finding it loaded. What will you do? Margaret asked as he moved toward the door. What needs doing? Samuel replied. Outside, the night had deepened. Lightning flashed on the horizon, illuminating the road to town in brief, stark bursts of light. The first heavy drops of rain began to fall as Samuel mounted the horse he'd hidden in Margaret's orchard. Eli's rifle lay across his saddle, its presence both a comfort and a burden. Thunder rolled closer as Samuel turned the horse toward town. Justice don't hide forever, he muttered to himself as the storm closed in around him. Evening fell over Calhoun County like a suffocating blanket. The Baptist church glowed with lamplight, its windows bright against the darkening sky. People streamed inside, farmers in their Sunday best, merchants in pressed suits, women with gloved hands clutching Bibles. Tonight was the revival, and Reverend Silas Greeley had promised salvation. Samuel crouched behind a wagon across the street, watching. He'd spent the day hiding in the woods, studying Eli's ledger until he knew every name, every date, every crime recorded in the sheriff's neat handwriting. Now, dressed in threadbare overalls borrowed from Jonas, and with a cap pulled low over his eyes, he looked like just another colored laborer, invisible to those who didn't care to see. The church bell rang 7 times. Samuel steeled himself to move when a hand gripped his arm from behind. I told you I wouldn't let you do this alone. Samuel spun around, nearly drawing the knife at his belt before recognizing the voice. Clara, he hissed. What are you doing here? Clara's face was set with determination. She wore a plain dress and head wrap, like those of the colored kitchen women who served at white gatherings. The children are safe with Jonas and his wife, she said, before he could ask. You think I'd let you walk into this snake pit alone? This isn't your fight, Samuel insisted, though relief flooded through him at the sight of her. It became my fight when they hung that sheriff. Clara's eyes flashed. Besides, you'll need someone watching your back. Before Samuel could argue further, she nodded toward the church's side entrance, where other colored workers were entering to prepare refreshments for after the service. I'll be in the kitchen. They won't look twice at another pair of hands. She squeezed his arm once, then slipped away through the shadows. Samuel watched her go, amazed and terrified by her courage. Inside the church, the congregation swelled with bodies and heat. Samuel entered through the back, keeping his head down, and found a spot standing against the rear wall where colored servants and late arrivals gathered. From here, he could see everything: the packed pews, the choir in white robes, and Reverend Silas at the pulpit, resplendent in black, with a purple stole. Deputy Royce Greeley sat in the front row, Eli's badge gleaming on his chest. The sight of it made Samuel's blood boil. Silas raised his arms and the congregation fell silent. Brothers and sisters, he called out, his voice rolling like thunder, we gather tonight in the shadow of tragedy. He spoke of sin and redemption, of the fallen nature of man and the righteous judgment of God. As his sermon built, he paced the pulpit like a caged predator. The Lord sends cleansing fire, Silas thundered. Just as he purged Sodom, he will purge this county of corruption and betrayal. The congregation responded with shouts of Amen and Praise Jesus. Many were on their feet now, swaying with religious fervor. Samuel's hand closed around the ledger inside his coat. He glanced toward the kitchen doors and caught a glimpse of Clara watching through the crack, her eyes wide with fear and resolve. She nodded once. It was time. As Silas reached the crescendo of his sermon, declaring that God's judgment falls on those who betray their own kind, Samuel stepped away from the wall. With deliberate movements, he climbed onto the nearest pew, then onto the back of it, rising above the crowd. "The Lord hates false witness," Samuel called out in a voice that carried over even Silas's preaching. The congregation turned as one, faces shocked at the interruption, and more shocked to see a colored man standing above them. And here is the truth. Samuel opened Eli's ledger and began to read. April 12, 1920. $500 paid to Reverend Silas Greeley by the White Citizens Council for organizing night riders against the Jackson family. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Silas's face darkened with fury. May 30th, 1920. Royce Greeley received $200 and 40 acres of foreclosed land in exchange for falsifying evidence against 3 colored sharecroppers. "Silence him!" Silas roared. But Samuel kept reading, his voice growing stronger with each revelation. July the 15th, 1920. Judge Harmon dismissed charges against known Klansmen who burned the Freedmen's School. Payment of $1,000 recorded. The church doors burst open. Margaret Cartwright staggered in, wild-eyed and disheveled. "It's true," she cried. "Every word is true. My husband died trying to expose these devils." Chaos erupted. Some people pushed toward the exits, while others surged toward Samuel. Royce drew his pistol, his face contorted with rage. "Lying nigger!" he screamed, aiming at Samuel. The gun roared. Margaret stumbled forward with a look of surprise, red blooming across her chest where the bullet had struck her instead of Samuel. She collapsed to the floor, eyes fixed on the cross behind the pulpit. Someone knocked over an oil lamp. Flames leapt up the heavy drapes beside the altar. More shots rang out as men in the congregation drew weapons. "Fire!" a woman screamed. Panic swept through the church like a wind. Samuel jumped down, fighting through the crush of bodies toward Clara, who had emerged from the kitchen. The heat from the spreading fire pressed against them as they struggled toward the back door. Behind them, the pulpit collapsed in a shower of sparks. Royce, trying to reach Silas, disappeared beneath the burning timbers with a terrible scream. Silas himself fled through a side door, his face seared by flames, his purple stole trailing fire as he ran. Samuel grabbed Clara's hand, and they burst out into the cool night air. They ran until their lungs burned, not stopping until they reached the road that led out of town. Samuel collapsed at the roadside, gasping for breath. The ledger was still clutched in his hand, its edges charred. With his other hand, he pulled Eli's badge from his pocket. Blood, Margaret's blood, stained its surface now, mingling with the dried blood of the sheriff himself. Behind them, the church was fully engulfed, flames reaching toward heaven like angry prayers. The fire reflected in Samuel's eyes as he stared back at the town that had nearly killed him and had killed so many others. Thunder rumbled overhead, promising rain that would come too late to save the church. Clara knelt beside him, her face streaked with soot and tears. "Was it worth it?" she whispered, looking at the distant inferno. Samuel had no answer. The badge in his palm felt heavier than ever. Pre-dawn light crept over the horizon, gray and uncertain. Samuel Turner lay beside the riverbank, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Blood seeped through his shirt, where a bullet had grazed his side during their escape from the burning church. Clara knelt beside him, tearing strips from her petticoat to wrap his wounded arm. "Hold still," she whispered, her fingers gentle but firm. The bleedings almost stopped. Samuel winced as she tightened the makeshift bandage. Behind them, across the fields, the glow of fires still burned in Calhoun County. The church wasn't the only building that had caught flame. The riot had spread, with some townsfolk turning on each other in the chaos. "We need to keep moving," Samuel said, struggling to sit up. "They'll be looking for us by sunup." Clara pressed him back down. "You need rest. We'll move when you can stand without shaking." A rustling in the nearby brush made them freeze. Samuel reached for the knife at his belt, but instead of a pursuer, a skinny white boy stumbled into view. He couldn't have been more than 16, dressed in stable clothes and carrying a satchel. "Don't hurt me!" the boy cried, throwing up his hands when he spotted them. "I'm just running, same as you." Samuel lowered his knife. "Who are you?" "Tommy. I work at Pearson's livery." The boy's eyes darted nervously between them. "The whole town's gone crazy. They're blaming colored folks for the fire, hunting down anyone who might have helped you." Clara exchanged a worried glance with Samuel. "What about Reverend Greeley? Did he burn in the church?" Tommy shook his head. "No, ma'am. Reverend's alive, but burned something awful. His face." The boy shuddered. "They took him to the courthouse. He's holed up in the judge's chamber with some of his men. Deputy Royce is dead, though. Crushed when the pulpit fell." Samuel's hand closed around Eli's badge in his pocket. "The courthouse," he murmured. "Of course he'd go there." "Samuel, no." Clara gripped his arm. "We need to get north. The children are safe with Jonas," Samuel said, his voice hardening. "But they'll never be truly safe while men like Silas live to spread their poison." He turned to Tommy. "Boy, you know where I might find a horse." Tommy hesitated, then nodded toward his satchel. "I took Pearson's best mare when I ran. She's tied back in those trees. You can have her if you let me come with you. I can't go home now. They saw me helping some colored folks escape the fire." Samuel studied the boy's frightened face. "You'd be safer heading north with my wife." "No," Clara said firmly. "If you're going back, I'm going with you." Her eyes held the same fierce determination they'd shown at the church. "This ends together." As the first true light of dawn broke over the trees, Samuel mounted Pearson's mare with Clara seated behind him. They gave Tommy directions to Jonas Fields's farm and what little money they had. "Tell Jonas what happened," Samuel instructed. "Tell him to take our children north as planned. We'll find them when we can." They rode back toward Calhoun County as the sun crested the horizon. The town looked like a battlefield. Buildings blackened, streets empty except for a few armed men patrolling. They circled wide, approaching the courthouse from behind, through the cemetery where generations of white Calhoun citizens lay buried. The courthouse stood like a wounded beast. Its roof had partially collapsed, and smoke stains darkened its white columns. But the stone structure had withstood the night's flames, even as buildings around it burned. "Wait here," Samuel told Clara, handing her Eli's rifle. "If I'm not back in 20 minutes, ride for Jonas's farm and don't look back." Clara gripped the rifle tightly. 20 minutes, she agreed. "Then I'm coming after you." Samuel slipped through the courthouse's back entrance, where delivery wagons once brought supplies. The interior reeked of smoke and charred wood. Papers and furniture lay scattered across blackened floors. He moved silently, following the sound of voices until he reached the judge's chambers. Through the cracked door, he could see Silas Greeley slumped in the judge's leather chair. The Reverend's face was a horror of blistered skin and raw flesh where the fire had kissed him. 2 men stood guard by the windows, guns at their sides. "They'll pay," Silas was saying, his voice a painful rasp. "Every one of them who helped that Turner devil. We'll burn them out, root and branch." Samuel pushed the door open wide. Before the guards could raise their weapons, he had Eli's knife at one man's throat. "Drop them," he ordered. "Or he dies first." The guns clattered to the floor. Samuel kicked them away, keeping the knife pressed against the guard's neck. "Leave us," he told the men. "This is between me and your reverend." The men glanced at Silas, who nodded almost imperceptibly. They backed out of the room, leaving Samuel alone with the burned preacher. Silas laughed, a terrible bubbling sound through damaged lips. "Come to finish what you started, Turner? The Lord preserved me from your fire for a purpose." Samuel approached slowly. "You talk about the Lord, but you've never served him a day in your life." "I preserved God's order," Silas spat, struggling to sit upright. "I kept the races separate as he intended. What do you know of God's will? More than you." Samuel reached into his pocket and pulled out Eli's badge. The metal was scorched and stained with blood. Eli's blood. Margaret's blood. "You killed a good man because he saw the truth about you." Samuel stepped closer, towering over the burned reverend. With deliberate movements, he pressed the badge against Silas's chest, driving the pin through the fabric of his shirt, nailing it there like a final judgment. "Then face his judgment," Samuel said quietly. Silas screamed as the badge pierced his flesh. Samuel turned away, retrieving an oil lamp that had survived the previous night's fire. With a steady hand, he smashed it against the wall, watching as flames licked up the curtains and spread to the papers strewn across the floor. The reverend's screams followed him as he walked out, never looking back. The courthouse would be his pyre. Outside, Clara waited with the horse, her face tight with anxiety. "It's done?" she asked, as flames began to lick through the courthouse windows. Samuel nodded once. He helped her onto the horse, and they rode away as shouts of alarm rose behind them. They passed the old hanging tree where Eli's body had swung just days before. Samuel slowed the horse and removed his hat. "Rest now, Sheriff," he said softly. "The debt's paid." They rode north as Calhoun County burned behind them. Months passed into years. The Turners found their children at Jonas's sister's home in Tennessee and continued north, settling finally in Chicago, where colored communities offered some measure of safety and opportunity. In a small black church on the south side, Samuel, his hair now flecked with gray, served as deacon. Inside a glass case beside the altar, Eli Cartwright's badge rested on a square of purple velvet. After Sunday service, a young boy lingered by the case, studying the tarnished metal with curious eyes. "Mr. Turner," he asked as Samuel approached, "why do we keep this old badge here? My mama says it belonged to a white sheriff." Samuel placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder and knelt beside him. "Because once, a white man died to prove we were worth savin', and I lived to prove he was right." The boy considered this with solemn eyes. Was he a good man, that sheriff? "He was becoming one," Samuel answered softly. "And sometimes, son, that's the most any of us can do." Sunlight fell through the stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the church floor. The badge caught the light, gleaming briefly as if remembering its purpose. In the background, the choir practiced for evening service, their voices rising in harmony. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see." Samuel closed his eyes, listening. The memories never faded, the fire, the blood, the choices that could never be undone. But here, in this moment, there was peace. A hard-won peace that had cost too many lives, but peace nonetheless. Clara joined him, slipping her hand into his. "You still think of him," she said. It wasn't a question. "Every day," Samuel admitted. "Him and all the others." The choir's voices swelled, filling the small church with sound and spirit. Samuel and Clara stood together before the badge that had once represented oppression, but now stood as testament to the possibility of change, even in the darkest times, even in the hardest hearts. Outside, Chicago bustled and roared, a city of promise and prejudice, both. But inside this sanctuary, for this moment, justice had been served and debts had been paid. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.